Good afternoon. Welcome back to Cool Your Heels with Lillian Caldwell and Passionate World Radio Network. Lillian's interview, The World in Your Hands. And this afternoon, our special guest is Mr. Hodge, who is going to talk to us about dropouts from high school that's happening in California, but it's also happening all over the United States, and it's a topic that needs to be discussed and how to prevent these kids from dropping out. So, good afternoon, Chris. How are you today?
Good afternoon. I'm doing fantastic.
Great. So, what have you found in California, especially with the kids dropping out of school?
Well, Lillian, it's a huge problem, an epidemic, really. Just in 2015, the last year the data came out, there were 50,000 dropouts in California. And across the country, between the ages of 16 and 24 years old, there's about over 1 million students that have dropped out of school. It comes out to about 7,000 dropouts a day, or every 26 seconds a student is dropping out of high school in the United States. And the U.S. is 22nd out of 27 developed countries in their graduation rates. And there are millions more students at risk of dropping out that need to have a solution.
And why do you think they are dropping out? I can't imagine that with today's curriculum that there should be dropouts as compared to perhaps the 50s and 60s when education was taught a little bit differently and was a lot more difficult.
You know, in my experience, I would agree. It's not really about the curriculum, the instruction, the teachers, the teaching. All those elements have continued to improve and modernize. The data shows that, there's a variety of factors, but statistically, income, low income is one of the biggest factors contributing to dropouts. Students from low-income families are nearly 2.5 times more likely to drop out than middle-income students, and 1/3 of children in poverty fail to graduate. And I think this goes back to initially a skill deficiency that develops in elementary school that can be linked to poverty. Children in poverty typically are 2 years behind grade level by 4th grade and 4 years by 12th grade. And there are a lot of different ways that poverty can impact education. But in younger grades, there can be instability at home, families moving around a lot, parents working extensive hours, and that can contribute to, skill deficiency based on, kids not attending school frequently, maybe not attending school, having eaten or slept. And so there's a lot of distractions that can begin at an early age. And those skill deficiencies, as kids start to get older, can translate to attendance issues, which then translate to credit deficiency. And so regardless of the quality of instruction or the school, there are these extraneous factors outside the school linked to income that can contribute to a student getting to a spot when they're in high school where they just give up.
Do you think then that perhaps this country ought to go back to the apprentice level where if a child does not show proficiency in schoolwork, and there's some kids coming out from even good families that have problems like that, and maybe offer them at a young age the opportunity to pick a skill or a craft, for example, to get involved with that and start being trained for that rather than lead to the inevitable where they're unemployed or they can't hold a job or all they're doing is really menial work, and rather put them in a position where they're learning, but it's not academia.
Well, I certainly think there's value in that, and I think providing students and families, menus of options where school can serve them can certainly be helpful. There's a renewed focus in California and across the country on career technical education, CTE, and providing students job skills in addition to college preparatory skills. But I think it really goes even above that. It's almost in my mind, a control to service mentality, especially in high school, and that's where the work that me and my organization do is at that level where kids have already fallen behind. So I think how to address it on the front end may be a bit of a different conversation. But traditional school, which works really well for 80% of the population, it's a very controlled environment. Everything about what the student engages in is really controlled, structured, and set up in a very specific way. And so for the students and families for whom that works, it works very, very well. But there's a percentage of the population which we see correlates in many cases to some of the challenges that lower income families face, where if they can't engage with the structured environment that's offered to them, it can contribute to the skill deficiency, the credit deficiency, and then dropping out. So what our organization does, we really try to flip that model from a control to service, a controlled environment to a service environment, in the sense of we really try to serve each individual student, each one of these dropouts or students that are at risk for dropping out, by personalizing the education to what they need, that's flexible to the needs that they have. We might not be able to change their circumstances in terms of economics or family or other issues that may be contributing factors, but what we can do is we can work around their scheduling needs. If they need to work, or if they may need to stay home part of the time taking care of siblings, or whatever the issues might be, we can create flexible scheduling, personalized intervention to help address that.
Because I know that it seems like every kid in high school, junior high school, and grade school has a cell phone of some kind out there with them. And it would seem to me that you could probably take advantage of the fact that these kids are using cell phones and perhaps give them more of a digital education so that at least they can keep up with the newer technology that's going to be coming along.
That's certainly something that we work to leverage. We see students having a lot of technology facility or literacy around social media type applications. We tend to see less literacy around more academic or business applications of technology, but it's certainly something that we can leverage to keep kids engaged. And really the engagement piece is critical. If you think about a student that has grown up in a situation with a lot of economic challenges, a lot of personal challenges, there's a traumatization effect cumulatively that a student may have experienced by the time they get to high school. And if there isn't some adult that has influence in their life about the potential long-term value of education, it's easy to see how they get to high school. And like for the average student that enrolls in our program, they're 17, 18 years old, a year credit deficient, 5th, 6th grade reading and math levels, in a low-income situation where they're likely needing to work or contribute to perhaps family income in some way. And so for them, there's some urgent needs that traditional education isn't addressing or helping them to understand the value that it can bring them. So what we do before anything else is focus on community and relationships. And so when students enroll in our learning centers, it's first about getting them plugged into a teacher who's really more like a mentor, a counselor, in a case-managed situation where that student will continue to meet with that same teacher as their core point of contact, as their facilitator in our program. And what that allows us to do is to really find out what hasn't been working for the student. What do they value, not value, or not understand about education? Build a relationship with them so the student feels safe and trusting in our school environment. And then we try to figure out what the students' interests are. What would they like to do? Try to open up their mind to some of the possibilities given their interest and their situation. Maybe help them see what they might be able to accomplish that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And then when we have that platform of engagement, where we really turn a disengagement for a long period of time into engagement, then it gives us the opportunity to start, shoring up some of those academic deficiencies, helping to build some of those academic skills, really skills on how to be a student, which can then translate into how to be an employee later on after graduation. So the engagement piece is key.
So have you found that more boys are dropping out of school, or do you find that more girls are dropping out of school? Or is it a pretty much even across the board, 50%, 50%?
Well, I think it's even enough that we need to focus on both. I mean, statistically, males drop out at a somewhat higher rate than females. In our program, our enrollment is nearly 50-50. It tends to be slightly higher female, but just by a few percentage points. And so we need to address both.
And do you find that some of the kids who are dropping out are due to teen pregnancy, or drugs, or alcohol?
All of the above.
Okay.
We do have a lot of pregnant teens, young moms to be, that drop out of school for that reason due to a pregnancy, and then they hear about our program either while they're pregnant or maybe after they've delivered, and we have a lot of ways that we support and accommodate those pregnant teens or parenting teens, and for the dads as well. We have some young men that come to us as new fathers, and they're needing to either work more to be a provider and support that situation, or as a caretaker. And so we have on both sides, both some of the parenting young men, and then the pregnant and parenting young ladies.
How does this differ from the GED that has been out there for a long time to encourage kids to come back and finish their high school diploma?
So GED is an examination process where kids can essentially test out of high school. And so we're a diploma program. And so there are some students that may be at a point in their credit deficiency and or their age where a GED might make sense. And if that's the case, there are preparation programs that are out there. We do have some available in our program as well to help them pass that test. It can be challenging for students to pass it. It requires a pretty rigorous study commitment in order to make that happen. And then there are some disadvantages. Passing the test doesn't mean that you've gotten all of the experience and academic skills that you need to be successful in either work or college. And so I would say that if given the opportunity, it would always be preferable to earn a diploma versus getting the GED. But if the student circumstances warrant, then getting the GED or another equivalency test, there are some state-level equivalency tests out there, could be the way to get them to their goals. But for us, we're a diploma program, so there's academic support, instruction, remediation, intervention programs, tutoring, counseling. So it's a full 360-degree wraparound support program that leads to a diploma, or for some of the students may lead to a GED.
Now, have any of the students gone beyond that to go into a junior college, perhaps, to further? Because I know there are some skills that you can pick up, electricity, refrigeration, HVAC, plumbing, that you can go into a school situation and pick up some liberal arts schools while still defining and refining your particular skill set that you're trying to get.
Yes, between 40 and 50% of our graduates do enter college, which is pretty typical of the nationwide average. And so we're pleased with that, since our students are, for the most part, students that have dropped out or at risk for dropping out of high school. So we've been able to get them to that finish line or that milestone of graduation, and then between 40 and 50% end up going on to college of some kind, which is good. But what we're really working on, and this is something that's still in process for us, is what is the intention of the student when they go to college, and how does college, whether it's 2-year, 4-year, or vocational, how does that fit into their life plan, and and what's the persistence percent in students that actually achieve that, and then if we can identify where the student wants to end up post high school, and if we can get them a leg up on that by either internally in our school getting them some CTE credit, some job training, job skills, get them plugged into a community college to take some of those courses concurrently while they're still in high school. That's where our program is really going now, is how can we move the ball further down the field once we've re-engaged them and addressed some of the credit deficiency issues while they're still in high school.
So what does a parent or guardian or somebody else who has taken interest in the student do when they realize that this person, this boy, this girl is thinking of dropping out? And so what's the procedure that they need to do in order to get in touch with you? I mean, how do they find out about you in the first place? Because I've never heard of your program before. And I'm pretty sure that there are other people, too, who are not aware that your program exists.
Most of the students that find their way into our program, it's through word of mouth. And so they've heard from a friend, or their parent has heard from a friend. And most of the students that enroll with us are already disengaged from school. So they've been out of school, on average, it's 3, 4, 5 months. And they hear about us. Somebody tells them, hey, I know you, dropped out of school, you left school, but there's this, program in our community where you can, get in a diploma program that has flexible scheduling, personalized intention, and they'll get you what you need. And that's most of the time how kids find out about us. We also, work with local community groups, other schools, basic community marketing, all of those elements, and some students and parents find their way to us through those vehicles, but most of them, honestly, it's word of mouth. That's how kids find us.
And what have you found also within your study of how well or how not well that these students do at the jobs that they take after they drop out of school? Do most of them just go from job to job, or do they manage to stay within their job and work their way up? Or what kind of things, if a student was listening to this conversation, what should they hear that you hope would get through to them to convince them not to drop out of school?
So the data post high school can be really challenging to track and maintain connection with the students. And so we work really hard to do that through an alumni association. And so for students that we've been able to maintain contact with, and actually that's one way that we help them be successful, is that we're always here for them even after they graduate. And so if they need to come back and get support from a counselor on filling out a resume or college applications, we're always there for them. And students frequently will come back several years later and get help. And so we've seen good success for our graduates in maintaining employment and maintaining employability. But the heavy lifting that we're doing is to try to get the percent of our graduates higher that we're actually able to maintain that contact with. And so we're working through an alumni vehicle to make that happen. But there isn't any external tracking system or data system out there where a school can find out, 2, 5, 10 years down the road, what their graduates are doing in terms of employment. And so we work to prepare the students on the front end, skill-wise, and more than anything else, belief in themselves and attitude. We believe that if we can re-engage students into the educational system, if we can restore their belief and confidence in themselves, and if we can give them tools, social emotionally, for how to navigate challenging situations, that those are all elements that will prepare them to be persistent and to maintain tenacity, with the challenges that they're going to face, which are real. Just getting the diploma doesn't in and of itself change some of the life circumstances that they have, but what it will do is it will give them an opportunity to not become one of those statistics where they end up in prison or on social services or committing crimes, which if you don't graduate from high school is a much more likely path for you just due to the challenges you're facing. And so having the diploma gives them more opportunities in and of itself. But then the way that their belief in themselves changes and the skills that they develop to cope with adversity is really what I think will be the game changer for them post-high school.
I would think so, too. It's a difficult world that's out there, and the biggest problem most college graduates have is making the transition from a college world into the real world where they have to be an adult and take responsibility for themselves and to make it work. So I assume that you provide that same type of bridge between once they graduate and get their diploma to go into the real world and be able to face what's out there.
We do. That's key. I mean, for the kids that we serve, a lot of them have experienced a lot of real world scenarios in terms of the streets and some tough environments that they've grown up in. But what they're not prepared for necessarily is employment and employability skills. And so all of the students that go through our program, at minimum, complete work readiness curriculum. They give them a lot of the basics we would take for granted as the basics, but a lot of times it's not on their radar and they're unaware. I mean, things like, how do you dress for an interview? How do you interview? How do you, shake the interviewer's hands, look him in the eye, answer questions, being on time? All of those elements that they're baseline skills for maintaining employment that many students that we see when they come into our program, they don't have. They were never taught that. They weren't trained to do that. And they don't have anyone in their life that's helping them with those skills. So we try to really help them with those basic employability skills. We have clothes available for them. They can come back after they graduate. We have, clothes banks, if you will, in each of our learning centers where they can dress. And equipping them with those types of skills can be transformative in the confidence they have in themselves and in the likelihood that they're going to be able to, be offered and keep a job.
Which is important because a lot of them, even the ones who do graduate normally from high school or don't always know, Dad and Mom don't provide them with this type of information. So when they go out into the real world, it's a shock to find out that they're not as adequately prepared as their self-confidence will lead them to believe.
Yep. As people say, you don't know what you don't know. And so what we try to do is identify, what our students don't know, and not just academically, but socially, emotionally, career preparedness, and we try to increase those skills and give them the tools that they're going to need to be successful, and hopefully, in whatever way we can, contribute to them leading a change in the dropout cycle and in the poverty cycle, and give them opportunities for them and their future families, if they have them, to really, break that cycle that frequently becomes a generational cycle of dropping out of high school and working in low-paying jobs. And we're trying to give students the opportunity to break out of that and maximize their potential. And they have so much that's often unrealized.
Well, a lot of it you have to also understand is their parents probably were forced to drop out of school as well, especially the girls, because they were expected to stay home and get married and have kids. And when you have tradition where there's a cycle of understanding of how far along you go in school, it makes it, I think, more difficult. I think it compounds the problem.
Yep, there's that there's that cultural element that's a huge factor. And going back to where we started with income, when you're facing real income issues, poverty issues, where you're not sure maybe where you're going to sleep the next day or the next month, or you're not sure where the money for food's going to come from. It's a basic hierarchy of needs. It's really difficult for both parents and kids to stay focused on a student's education as a priority when you're dealing with those types of economic challenges or issues of violence in the community that you're living in. So many of those factors that exist outside of the schoolroom can become huge factors in what happens success-wise inside the schoolroom.
Yeah, you can see it if you pay attention. Chris, please tell everybody where they can find your organization on the World Wide Web, how they can get in contact with you, and anything else they need to know.
If they search Learn for Life, LEARN, the number 4, Life, LIFE, they can find us. We're in California, so if you're in California, we have learning centers in many communities across the state, and so if you get on our website, then you would be able to look up where the nearest location to where you're living would be.
Terrific. Well, that wraps it up with Chris Hodges and High School Dropout and his organization. Please look him up. And if you feel or you know somebody who feels like they're going to drop out, even if you don't live in California, give Chris's organization a call and see what they can do for you. Maybe they'll have a learn distance program the way the University of Phoenix operates. To listen to this program all over again, you can go over to PassionateWorldRadioNetwork.com. So that's https://PassionateWorldRadioNetwork.com. Facebook.com/PWR Network LLC. Twitter.com/Caldwell, CAULDWELL_S. iTunes/Lillian_Caldwell. Google Plus, PWR Network LLC. And, of course, we're all in the podcast directory, so please look us up. And before you go away and stray, the Marquis of Halifax had this to say in the late 17th century: innocence hath a very short style. Thank you all very much for listening. You can hear this interview also on Cool Your Heels with Lillian Caldwell at AM/FM 247 next week, Tuesday, from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all very much for listening. And remember, please keep listening. Thank you.